The name Don Knotts evokes the image of a man perpetually on edge. His nervous stammers, wide-eyed stares, and a laugh that echoed through generations are the hallmarks of a comedic genius. As Barney Fay, the bumbling deputy on The Andy Griffith Show, he transformed clumsiness into an art form, earning 5 Emmy Awards and cementing his place as one of television's most beloved stars. Yet, the story didn't end with applause and accolades. Hidden beneath the laughter and the public persona was a man scarred by a lifelong battle with fear, illness, and profound loneliness. His daughter Karen Knotts is now 71 years old and has recently broken her silence about the truth behind her father's life. For decades, fans only knew Don Knotts as the beloved bumbling Barney Fay from The Andy Griffith Show or as the goofy landlord Mr. Frilly in Three's Company. But behind the laughter and the fame was a man who carried enormous pain, insecurities, and private struggles that very few ever knew. Karen has now shared details that paint a heartbreaking picture of her father's personal life. The reality of Don Knotts' journey is far more complicated than his public image suggested. While he brought joy and laughter to millions, he privately battled with inner demons that haunted him until his final days. The truth she shares is not easy to hear, but it makes his legacy even more remarkable. Karen reveals that her father's life began in hardship. Born in 1924 in Morgantown, West Virginia, Don grew up during the Great Depression in a family marked by poverty and dysfunction. His father, suffering from mental illness, was abusive and terrifying, leaving young Don in a state of constant fear. His mother did what she could, but the household was deeply unstable. This environment left scars that followed down for the rest of his life. Karen describes how her father rarely spoke about his childhood because the memories were too painful. The awful truth is that his comedic genius was born out of trauma. His ability to make others laugh was in many ways his survival mechanism, a way to mask the sadness and fear he carried inside. From an early age, Don realized that humor gave him a way out. Karen recalls her father telling her stories about how making others laugh was the only time he felt safe and valued. He developed routines, practiced voices, and used his natural awkwardness to turn fear into comedy. This transformation became his lifeline. But Karen admits that while the world saw Don's humor as effortless, it was actually the product of years of self-defense against pain. His humor was medicine for himself and for everyone around him. Yet the heartbreaking truth is that Don Knotts never truly believed in his own worth. Even after fame, his insecurities never disappeared. Karen reflects on how her father's life changed when he landed the role of Barney Fay in The Andy Griffith Show in 1960. Don's portrayal of the lovable but clumsy deputy sheriff won him 5 Emmy Awards and made him a household name. To millions, he was the embodiment of joy. But Karen now admits the awful truth. Her father was often overwhelmed by the pressure of living up to Barney Fay's perfection in the eyes of fans. He feared rejection and constantly worried that people would eventually discover he wasn't as funny as they believed. Even at the height of his success, his self-doubt haunted him. Karen shares that one of the most heartbreaking parts of her father's story was how alone he often felt. Despite his fame, Don suffered from chronic anxiety and depression. He hid his mental health struggles from the public, fearing it would ruin his career. At home, Karen saw the toll it took on him, the sleepless nights, the nervous habits, the constant need for reassurance. The awful truth was that Don Knotts spent much of his life battling demons that no one else could see. While his characters were confident in their silliness, Don himself was fragile. Karen explains that as his daughter, it was painful to see how different he was offstage compared to the man the world adored on television. Karen also reveals how her father's career often came at the expense of family life. Don loved his children deeply, but his relentless work schedule and perfectionism sometimes kept him distant. Karen remembers times when she longed for his attention, but he was consumed by the demands of acting. Looking back, Karen says she understands why he pushed himself so hard. He was driven by fear of failure. But the tragedy is that while millions got the best of Don Knotts' talents, his own family often saw him exhausted, withdrawn, or weighed down by insecurity. For Karen, that is one of the hardest truths to share. In the 1970s, Don reinvented himself with roles in family films and eventually as Mr. Furley in THRE's company. Karen remembers how proud he was to keep working to prove he wasn't just Barney F. Yet even then he worried about TYP casting and whether he could ever escape the shadow of his earlier success. Karen explains that her father was harder on himself than anyone else. He constantly second-guessed his performances even when critics praised him. The awful truth, she admits, is that Don never fully accepted his greatness. While fans saw a comedy genius, he often saw only flaws. As Don grew older, health struggles began to take over his life. Karen recalls how her father's eyesight and hearing began to decline, and he fought through illnesses with quiet resilience. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in his later years, a battle he chose to face with dignity. Karen shares the heartbreaking truth that her father often downplayed his pain to protect others. He didn't want to burden his family or fans with the reality of his suffering. Even in his final days, Don Knotts was thinking of others, determined to keep laughter alive while privately enduring hardship. Karen eventually became an actress and comedian herself, often inspired by her father's legacy. But she admits that carrying the Knotts name was both an honor and a challenge. Fans expected her to embody the same humor, and at times the pressure was overwhelming. Still, she cherishes the lessons her father left her. The awful truth, Karen says, is that while he was never fully at peace with himself, he taught her the value of resilience, humor, and kindness. She believes his legacy is not just in his roles, but in his ability to turn unimaginable pain into laughter for millions. Don Knotts passed away in 2006 at the age of 81. Surrounded by loved ones, Karen recalls those days with deep emotion, admitting that saying goodbye to her father was the most heartbreaking experience of her life. What haunts her most is knowing how much he doubted himself until the end. The awful truth she reveals is that Don never fully realized just how much he meant to people. Even as fans worldwide mourned him, he left this world without truly believing he was as special as everyone else knew him to be. Since her father's passing, Karen has dedicated herself to keeping his memory alive. She wrote the memoir Tied Up in Knots and has performed one-woman shows sharing stories of her father's life. At 71, she continues to honor him by revealing both the joys and the struggles of his journey. Karen says the awful truth is necessary to share because it makes her father's story more real. He wasn't just a clown or a caricature. He was a complex, fragile, brilliant man who used laughter as a shield against pain. By telling his true story, Karen hopes fans will love him even more. In the end, Don Knotts' life was both triumphant and tragic. He rose from a broken childhood to become one of the greatest comedians of all time, touching lives across generations. But behind the laughter, he battled insecurities, health struggles, and deep loneliness. Karen's revelations remind us that even the brightest stars often shine through darkness. Her father's genius came at a great personal cost. Yet his legacy remains one of joy, laughter, and resilience.